Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question is, can I analyze the case of Adrienne Shelley? She was the topic of a 2021 HBO documentary titled Adrienne. Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and consider supporting me on Patreon. I will put the link to Patreon in the description for this video. First, I'll look at the background of Adrienne Shelley. I'll move to the timeline of the crime, then offer my analysis. Adrienne Levine was born in Queens, New York on June 24, 1966. She was raised on Long Island, New York. She often went by her stage name, Adrienne Shelley. When she was around 10 years old, she started performing on stage. Her father, Sheldon, died of a heart attack when he was 40 years old. Adrienne was 12 at this time. Adrienne selected the last name Shelley because her father was a major influence on her career. After Adrienne graduated from high school, she went to Boston University. There she studied film production, but she dropped out after her junior year. She moved to Manhattan and pursued acting. She was just 1 year away from getting her degree. Adrienne was cast in a 1989 independent film titled The Unbelievable Truth. In 1990, she appeared in the movie Trust. Adrienne's career was gaining momentum. She appeared in a number of television series, movies, and off-Broadway plays. An off-Broadway play is a theater venue in New York City with a seating capacity between 100 and 499. An off-Broadway play is in a theater that holds less than 100. So the more times the word off appears before Broadway, the lower the seating capacity. I've always found this usage of the word off as unusual. We don't see it used this way for other items. For instance, no one looks at a love seat and calls it an off couch, or a chair and calls it an off couch. I find this naming convention to be a little off, like it's off the mark or off base, but it appears as though I'm off on a tangent. Over time, Adrienne became more active in the areas of writing and directing. She worked on a number of projects, but is probably best known for the 2007 movie Waitress. After a long series of failed romantic relationships, Adrienne met a man named Andrew Ostroy. He had been divorced twice and had 3 children. He was the CEO of a marketing firm. Adrienne had found him on Match.com in 2001. The couple married on December 21, 2002. They had a daughter named Sophie in 2003. Now moving to the timeline of the crime. On November 1, 2006, at about 9:30 a.m., Adrienne's husband, Andrew, dropped her off in an apartment building in Manhattan's West Village. Adrienne used a 4th-floor apartment as an office. At some point during that day, a 19-year-old illegal immigrant from Ecuador named Diego Pilco murdered Adrienne Shelley in her apartment. He had been performing construction work on a 3rd-floor apartment. Diego strangled Adrienne before staging the scene to make it seem as though she brought an end to her own life. He put a bedsheet around her neck and hanged her from a shower rod in the bathroom. Adrienne's husband was unable to get in contact with her during the day. He made his way to Adrienne's apartment and asked a doorman to accompany him. Andrew and the doorman found Adrienne's body at around 5:45 p.m. The police investigated, but they did not think the case involved homicide. They considered the case to be closed. Andrew kept contacting the police, telling them that they needed to investigate. He also contacted the famous forensic pathologist, Dr. Michael Baden, who is like the medical examiner to the stars. After examining the body, Michael Baden said that Adrienne had bruises on her face and forehead, as well as injuries to her hands. It looked like she had been beaten. It's worth noting that other forensic pathologists disagreed with Michael. Despite this disagreement, the pressure from Adrienne's husband caused the police to take another look at the case. The police visited Adrienne's apartment again and examined the bathroom where her body was found. They took a particular interest in a sneaker print that was on the toilet. Eventually, they concluded that it belonged to a Reebok sneaker. Investigators were able to determine that no one who should have been in the apartment had those sneakers. Not friends, not family, not any of the authorities who investigated the case. The police asked if there was any construction work being done in the building and found out that construction was going on in a third-floor apartment. When they examined the apartment, they found matching sneaker prints in the dust. They visited the construction workers on the crew and discovered that one of them, Diego Pilco, had shoes that matched the footprint. Diego was arrested on November 6. He quickly confessed to murdering Adrienne and staging the crime scene. The first version of Diego's story was that Adrienne confronted him about the construction noise. He threw a hammer at her during this confrontation. When Adrienne returned to her apartment, Diego followed her. He grabbed her by her apartment door, at which time Adrienne slapped him. Diego responded by punching her in the face. This caused Adrienne to fall to the ground and hit her head. The impact rendered her unconscious. Diego thought that he had killed her, so he staged the scene to make it appear as though there was no homicide. The police believed that Diego was the killer, but they did not believe all the details he provided. In 2008, Diego came up with a new story about what happened on the day of the murder. Diego said that when he was coming back to the construction job after having lunch, he noticed Adrienne in the elevator. He followed her to her apartment with the intent of robbing her. When she entered the apartment, she left the door open. He entered the apartment hoping to steal from her purse. Adrienne caught him in the act. Diego grabbed her phone and covered her mouth in order to prevent her from screaming. He choked her with his hands, which rendered her unconscious. Diego then strangled her with a bedsheet. After this, he staged the scene and fled. Prosecutors knew that Diego had confessed to murder, but they were worried that he could return to his original story and the jury might find him guilty of a lesser charge. They offered Diego a plea bargain. He pleaded guilty to first-degree manslaughter and received 25 years in prison with no possibility of parole. He is still eligible for up to 3.5 years of sentence reduction for good behavior, so he could be out in 21.5 years. When he is released, Diego will be deported to Ecuador. In the HBO documentary, Adrienne, Andrew had a conversation with Diego in prison. Here Diego offered a third version of what happened, which was similar to his second version. The only difference was that in the third version, Diego said he killed Adrienne by strangling her with his hands. He made it seem as though she was already dead when he put the bedsheet around her neck. The autopsy results showed that Adrienne died by being strangled by the bedsheet. So Diego was lying to Andrew. Now moving to my analysis. Here are my thoughts in a few areas that stood out to me in this case. Item number 1. The police have been criticized for initially losing interest in investigating this case as a homicide. When they initially looked at the crime scene, they thought that no killer was involved. There was no sign of a struggle, no forced entry, and they did not believe that anything was missing from the apartment. In addition, Adrienne's recent internet search history featured topics related to death. There was, however, evidence pointing toward homicide. For example, the knot that was used to tie the sheet to the shower rod was unusual. It was a knot used in sailing, but Adrienne did not like sailing. The door to the apartment was locked, but only the doorknob, not the deadbolt, meaning the killer could have simply locked the doorknob and pulled the door closed. As far as the search on death, Adrienne was a writer. Writers often search a wide variety of topics on the internet, many of which are not related to something affecting them personally, but rather they are associated with their work. Adrienne had every reason to live. Her career was really starting to take off, and she had a 2.5-year-old daughter who she adored. Item number 2. There is no question that the determination of Adrienne's husband, Andrew, is what led the police to reopen the investigation. He repeatedly made a convincing argument that Adrienne would not have harmed herself. He also recruited Michael Baden, whose opinion put even more pressure on the police. If Andrew had listened to the police, Diego would have never been arrested for the murder. I think the police were quick to dismiss Andrew initially because many people in Andrew's situation claim that their loved one was murdered. No one wants to believe that a loved one would choose to exit this world. Sometimes, however, homicide is the best explanation. This case highlights the importance of skepticism. As it turns out, Andrew was 100% correct. His wife was murdered. Item number 3. After the police decided to reinvestigate, they did an incredible job of tracking down Diego Pilco. The police started off in a terrible way by denying a crime was committed, but then when they decided to do their job, their performance was phenomenal. They went from being the worst investigators to being the best investigators during the course of one case. This exemplifies the importance of the decision-making process behind investigating. So much emphasis is placed on forensic technology, like DNA, video surveillance, and cell phone data, but if the police never launch an actual investigation based on the initial circumstances of a death, it does not matter how robust their technology is. Item number 4. When the police arrested Diego, they had very little to connect him to the murder. They knew that he was in the building, and they knew that somebody wearing a sneaker like his was in the bathroom where Adrienne's body was found. They could not prove that Diego was wearing the sneaker at the time. They could not prove when the footprint was left on the toilet. If Diego had not confessed, he would have walked free. Item number 5. What was Diego's motive for the murder? This is a bit of a mystery, but I think he's lying about what happened. Diego would have people believe that this was a robbery gone wrong. He was simply trying to pull some money out of Adrienne's purse when she confronted him. Instead of fleeing, he murdered her and staged the scene. How often does that happen with a robbery gone wrong? I think it's much more likely that Diego had an intent to kill Adrienne from the beginning. Diego admitted that he followed her to her apartment. My guess is he forced his way in right after Adrienne opened the door. She did not fail to close the door behind her. This was a premeditated murder. Diego should never be free from prison. Item number 6. Diego was in the United States illegally. This case brought attention to crimes committed by illegal immigrants. This topic has become a political argument. Therefore, the media downplayed Diego's immigrant status and emphasized Adrienne's work as a writer, director, and actress as the main component of the story. Statistically, illegal immigrants have a higher criminal conviction rate than legal immigrants, but a lower conviction rate than native-born U.S. citizens. Therefore, in theory, Diego was at a low risk to commit a crime. Interestingly, it was Diego that tied his immigration status to the murder. He said that he owed $13,500 to people who transported him illegally to the United States. That's why he was trying to steal money from Adrienne. I don't know the answer to the political debate about immigration, but one thing's for sure. If Diego had obeyed the law in the first place, like if he had never entered the United States illegally, Adrienne Shelley would still be alive. Item number 7. After Adrienne's father died, she became afraid of dying young. Ultimately, she died at age 40, the same age her father was when he died. Both of their deaths were unexpected. It's a strange coincidence, but their deaths do not appear to be connected in any way. Item number 8. The main emphasis of the HBO documentary Adrienne was the massive loss endured by Andrew, his daughter Sophie, and other people who knew Adrienne. Many documentaries about criminal cases focus on the perpetrators, but this documentary focused on the victim. It was a reminder that the families of victims suffer tremendously. Their pain doesn't end when the perpetrator goes to prison. One can really sense how Andrew struggled throughout the years. He suggested that when Adrienne was murdered, he was frozen in time. His love did not go anywhere. Some people may watch the documentary and think that Andrew is stuck in the past, but I think that he is simply acknowledging the tremendous amount of grief and pain that he's feeling. He's trying to do his best to move forward. His way of coping with his loss was to insist on justice for Adrienne and to highlight the contributions that his wife made during her career. Andrew certainly took a public approach with his grief, but that doesn't mean his way of experiencing loss is unhelpful or ill-advised. I view it as valuable because other people will connect with his grief. They will learn from his experiences that what they are going through is normal. I think that Andrew actually achieved a lot of good from a terrible situation. Those are my thoughts on the case of Adrienne Shelley. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comment section. They always generate an interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found my analysis of this topic to be informative. Thanks for watching.